Today I'll introduce curves. To find those, I just go to Create, Curve Tools. We have many different types of curve tools you can create with. There's the CV curve tool, EP curve tool, Bezier, pencil, 3-point circular arc, and 2-point circular arc. They each do things a little bit differently. The CV and EP basically do the same thing. It's just a mild difference in how they're created. So if I use the CV curve tool, and I start clicking in my scene, it creates points that it's going to use to create the curve from. These are called control vertices, but the curve does not stick to the control vertices except for the beginning and the end. Instead, it uses them as a sort of average place for where the curve is going to go, and it sort of flows around them. If I hit Q to turn that off, and then right-click, I can see control vertex right here. I can get those control vertices back, and I can adjust my curve. And also notice that it always draws it on the grid. I want to change it so it's three-dimensional. I can lift it up, pull it down. But the thing about the CV curve tool is that it does not create the curves on the dots that you click. Delete that. Back to Create, Curve Tools. EP curve, on the other hand, will draw the curve through the points you click. Once you stop drawing it, and you right-click and go to Control Vertex, you got the control vertexes again, and in order to adjust this thing, you have to grab those. And left with the same problem we had before, which is that the control vertex and the curve do not sit on the same point. If I want to use the edit point, I can use that instead. So you should have access to either one of those when you draw the curve using either of these tools. Just a question of which one you're drawing it with to start with. This is why I tend to use the edit point instead of the control vertex. I know what I'm getting when I first start making it. The other versions I don't use nearly as much, but if you're used to drawing curves in something like Illustrator, that's where the Bezier curve tool comes in. Click and draw, get those little handlebars, click and drag, click and drag, click and drag, click and drag. Q to turn that off. And now if I go to my control vertex, I get those little handles again. Use my move tool, W, and I can adjust those. Just be careful because this does move in 3 dimensions. So as I'm doing that, I'm wiggling this up and down as well. You can stretch it out like that, shrink it in. Great. Curve tools, pencil curve tool. This lets me just click and drag and draw a curve freehand. But this is going to create a lot of control vertices because it captures every single wiggle in my movement. Create curve tools. 3-point circular arc. With this one, I click on 3 locations and it creates an arc based on those 3 points. I can click and drag on any one of these points and it adjusts the arc. Even in 3 dimensions. If I try grabbing arrows and moving them on the grid. This way it doesn't go up and down. A little chaotic to try to figure out exactly what's going on, but like anything, spend some time working with it, you'll get a better feel for how it functions. Create curve tools, 2 points circular arc. It's similar, but this one only takes 2 points. It's a little bit stranger though, because it doesn't necessarily lay flat on the grid. It doesn't really know where the curve is supposed to go because it doesn't have the third point to keep it on the grid. Let me try that, drawing that again. Once again, I can move my points around. If I click on this, it reverses the direction of the curve. This also lets me change the radius. Honestly, I find this one really hard to control. I wouldn't make much use of that in most cases, but sometimes I'm sure you'll find a use for it if you try hard enough. I may notice every time I've drawn a curve, it's always been drawing it onto this grid, like I mentioned before, the grid or the plane, extending from that grid. If I'm looking from the front view and go to my EP curve tool, it now draws that from the plane that would be perpendicular to the front view. Same thing for any of these other directions right here. If I click the top view and draw it, draws it there. Go with my side view, draw from here, draws in that direction. The perspective is always on the ground plane. If I want to draw this onto an object, however, I can create an object, or in this case, import one from the content browser. They've got a bunch of pre-built characters in here. And let's say I want to draw the curve of a necklace around this character's neck. Well, if I just start clicking with my curve tool, it's going to start trying to draw that onto the grid again. Don't know where it put it because the grid was somewhere very, very far away. Could be anywhere. I'm just going to delete that. I have to turn this into an object that Milo recognizes something that I can draw on. And to do that, I go up to where these little magnets are. The last on the list, make the selected object live. Click on this, and this is now live. What that means is I cannot select this object anymore. It is not so much an object at this point. It is a template for something that I can draw on. If I want to turn it back, I have to click it up here again, and now I can reselect the object. So I'm going to turn that back to a live surface. It says so right there. Now if I go to my curve tool, I'll start at the back of the neck, I think. There's a curve. The great thing about this is if I go right click and go to my edit point again, I drag these edit points around, they will stay on the surface. Can get a little bit hard to control them sometimes, so they're trying really hard to stay where they belong. Just sort of nudge them instead of trying to drag them too far. Come on now. There we go. Make sure they're spread out so that curve is nice and smooth. And later on, I can use this to create a polygon object out of this. I won't bother with that for the time being. Or, if I want to, I can turn off my live surface again. Instead of drawing it freehand, I can right-click and select an edge. Just double-click that, get the edge all the way around. Go to Modify, Convert, look for Polygon Edges to Curve, and now I've created a curve out of that edge. So that's a couple different ways you can create a curve that perfectly matches a three-dimensional shape. I'll show more about how to use these curves in a different video.